Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Richard Dick, and my co-PI Moussa will be on later. We'll do a tag team type of presentation, and we're talking about our project that is involving what we call optimized shrub intercropping system as a way to remediate soils and particularly look at the potential to improve cowpea productivity. So in the Sahel in West Africa, a major constraint, ongoing ecological challenges, just the intensification of agriculture and of the landscapes for fuel wood, and a reduction in soil quality, and ultimately degrading soils is an ongoing challenge in these environments. And this is shown in this particular figure here, where you can see the one line is an exponential growth in populations in West Africa, and at the same time the lower triangle showing that the millet yield has not really increased, in the blue triangles has not really increased since the 1960s, and people are feeding themselves by basically adding more land, and that's what's shown in the millet area here, where it's tapering off the amount of land that goes into production. So what we really have to do now is start increasing yields. And green revolution technology has not been adapted, as I'm sure most of you are well aware. So we have to look for other solutions. And one of the potential things that we've been working on for the last 20 years is the use of intercropping local native shrubs, Pellistigma reticulatum and Gera senegalensis. And we've been studying these in various capacities, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But this is what they do naturally grow in farmers' fields, and these two particular species are found all through West Africa, from Senegal all the way to Chad, and they do survive in farmers' fields. So typically what happens is that there are a few hundred shrubs, 200 to 300 shrubs are fairly common from our work in Senegal, and it's probably typical throughout the Sahel. And being in farmers' fields, the farmers want to get rid of them, so they coppice them, they cut them at the soil surface, put them in a pile, and then burn them, which is shown in the right-hand corner here. And sadly, these degraded soils, this doesn't really help, because this is organic matter that could be going in the soil, which is shown as potential biomass, but they want a nice clean seed bed, and they end up then with these sort of stark moonscapes with these burn piles and carbon charcoal in these localized, but they're losing a lot of organic matter that's going up in smoke, nitrogen and nutrients and carbon and so forth. At any rate, it makes for a seed bed that they like, and then they plant the crops after that. So in our particular system, we've developed what we call an optimized system, and done a lot of research on this, from soil microbiology, hydrology, agronomy, and a lot of different ways. We've published 30 plus papers on the system now in over the last 20 years, and ended up with this what we call optimized shrub intercropping. And from a long-term site, this is a picture here showing minus shrub and plus shrub, and you can see the growth response. And so in this system, instead of the 200 to 300 shrubs per hectare, or even less, depending on the farmer, we've increased it up to 1,200 to 1,300 shrubs per hectare. So if you put a shrub on every square meter, you'd have 2,400. So we're roughly half of that maximum possible shrubs in a hectare. So, and the second thing we're doing is we're not burning the residue, we're chopping it up and putting it back in the soil. And this is providing a fairly high amount of organic matter, especially for a semi-arid environment, where we can put 3 to 4 tons of biomass back in the soil if you get these, if you increase the number of shrubs per hectare. So the system is relatively simple to the idea. So the coppicing is still there, but instead of burning on the left-hand side here, the residue is put back in the soil. You can see the small pieces here of the recently incorporated material before the crops are planted. And this picture down below in the lower right-hand corner shows one of our participating farmers in our on-farm pilot testing of this system, in this case, planting Gera seedlings in order to bring them up to the 1,200 to 1,500 shrubs per hectare density. So as I said, we've done a lot of research on these systems, and they clearly have a real strong benefit. They take degraded soils and remediate them. Within 3 to 5 years, you can see, especially in the north and the sandy soil, you can see dramatic increases in the soil quality in terms of the organic matter, the microbiology, nutrient availability, and so forth. And and another important part from global climate change is it is a way to sequester carbon. We've doubled or even more than doubled the amount of carbon in soils after 8 to 10 years of putting these systems in place. The other really interesting thing is that we found that these shrubs do what's called bioirrigation, what we've coined as bioirrigation, which is hydraulic lift, a phenomenon driven by hydraulic lift. We published a paper actually in 2018, several papers on this, but in 2018 published a paper that confirmed that indeed water that's pumped up by shrubs from the wet subsoil, very deep, these shrubs can go 20, 30 feet deep down to get to the top of the water table. And they bring water to the surface at night when photosynthesis stops, and they leak that water out into the surrounding soil. And that's enough to actually keep a crop. We've shown that this hydraulic lift water can get a crop through a fairly long in-season drought period and keep the crop growing. And so that's a very important finding. And then the other important finding is we find that all crops get to maturity quicker. So that's another important property of this system, because in a semi-arid environment, you often have erratic rainfalls patterns. And so the sooner you get your crop in and out of the season, out of the system and to maturity, that's a real advantage in these erratic low rainfall regions. And the net effect is that we get dramatically increased yields, and the yields increase as the soils are more degraded and more sandy. And this is the site here, the Gara senegalensis site, which is where we see the most dramatic effect. And Gara does grow in the drier region, Paleostigma in the wetter region of the Sahel. So the particular objectives of our project are to do on-farm pilot testing and of cowpeas. And this actually is embedded in another project we have funded through the Peanut Lab, which is really the primary funding to set up and work with these pilot farms. But within that, we're imposing some cowpea treatments. So one is, I'll talk more about this in a minute.
Minutes.
And then some of the main components that we're following here are screening of cowpea varieties, looking for varieties that are that are better adapted for intercropping with shrubs. And then we're also monitoring some of the soil properties and so forth, and then ultimately disseminating findings of the project. So just to quickly conclude my part of this, we're doing an on-farm pilot testing where we're doing plus OSS and then the traditional system shown on the left here, and things are being monitored in soils, agronomic productivity, socioeconomics, and again, that's really being funded by the Peanut Project. But with the same farmers, we were planning to take 12 of these farmers and see if we could do a sequential 2 crops of cowpea in sequence. And the idea here is that with the OSS, really providing a better soil and hydraulic lift, that would be a way to perhaps allow that second crop to finish after the rains had stopped. And so we wanted to present, we were supposed to do that last summer, but due to COVID and just the inability to get technicians out and with the lockdown, we were unable to do that. So that part's been postponed till next summer. But we did do the cowpea variety trial. And with that, I'll turn it over to Moussa Diangar, who will go over the results we have so far. And we, as he mentioned, we had a major infestation of insects this particular year, which caused some issues in terms of what we could measure. So with that, I'll turn it over to Moussa.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm a cowpea breeder at ISRA, and I'm involved in this project in the objective 2, which is the screening of the cowpea cultivar for superior performance on the OSS. So if you look at this picture, you can notice down where it's written no shrub plots compared to where it's written plus shrub plots. So what you see is an increase of the biomass. So we have one variety composed of 4 lines. The picture is not really good, but still you can see the difference. So that uh, that is showing that the shrub is increasing the yield or the performance of any variety that you have. Next slide. Yeah, we can go deeper. If you look at this box plot, you have in the left uh, Piliostigma reticulatum, and you have in the right Gera senegalensis. So Piliostigma was in the south at Nyoro, and uh, Gera senegalensis was at Chess. As you noticed, the traditional management system and the optimized system are very different. The optimized system always outperform the traditional system when it's about Piliostigma reticulatum. But we see that the performance, no matter the management system, when it involves Gera senegalensis, you see it's consistent. So as a preliminary result, we can assume that Piliostigma system is more suitable to the variety of the copy that we have used. So when you compare the two, what we have obtained in the in the south, Nyoro, and what we have obtained in Chess, you can see that Nyoro outperform Chess. Next slide. This is due to many factors, but here, when you consider the diameter of the cullet, which is showing uh, in an extent the uh, vigor of the plant, we still notice the same trend. So shrub versus not shrub, non-shrub. So we have better performances in shrubs, especially when it's about Piliostigma reticulatum. So in general, you can notice that in neuro we have better performances. In chess, we don't have very good performances. But this is also due to the fact that the rainy season at neuro is always better when you compare it to the rainy season at Bombay. Something else also is the presence of the insects. We have noticed during this trial that we had uh, uh, an important rate of infestation of Amsakta and the trips. So this is the reason why we can't show the results of the grain yield, but still we have obtained very good data uh, considering the biomass, the diameter of the cullet. Next. So for the fresh biomass, so we have taken it in the basis of 16 plants and still the same train. The results are consistent in chess where it involves Gera senegalensis and the traditional management system. But when you compare it to the traditional management system found in Nyoro with the Piliostigma reticulatum, that is always the same train. So Piliostigma reticulatum outperform way better the Gera senegalensis. Next. And here, this is some information about the abortion that we have noticed. So because of the COVID situation, it was very difficult to have a student there and knowing also that we cannot be there all the time. So we experienced some planned abortion. And we have took some measurement on the plants that we had sampled. And as you can notice, the results were pretty much consistent. So that means that either in the plots in chess and in in Nyoro, we had experienced plant abortion. So if you consider this as a covariate, then if you consider the two location, there is no significant differences. Next. This gives us more information. You can focus on the interaction of location and genotype and system and genotype. What you can see is we only have significant effect when you consider dry biomass variate and plant abortion. For the rest, we did not have uh, any significance effect when you consider the interaction. But when you take the main effect, which is the management system, the genotype, and the location, in the location you can see that there is a significant difference in all the variables, and that is the same thing for a management system. However, the genotype, they perform consistently in all locations. Next. Also, when you see in this slide, you have the performances. Kerndari is at Nyoro, Kermatar is at Chess, and you always see that Kerndari outperform Chess, no matter the variety that is considered. At the same time, also, Piliostigma reticulatum always outperform Gera senegalensis, as I was trying to explain previously. So sometimes Piliostigma, sometimes Gera senegalensis is similar to the traditional management system. So this let us know that Piliostigma reticulatum is more suited when it's about biofertilization when compared to Gera senegalensis. Next. So this is a slide that showing us the performance of the varieties. So in the Gera senegalensis instance, you see that the best one was Kel. In the Piliostigma reticulatum, the best one still was Kel, and in the traditional management, the best one was Che. But something that we can notice is Leona is always coming back. So Leona is suited for Gera senegalensis, it's suited for Piliostigma reticulatum, and it's suited for traditional management system. We also have Murid, and there is an explanation to this also, because uh, in chess we experience some drought at a certain moment of the plant growth. So knowing that Murid is uh, very adapted to dry areas, so this is what we expected even before conducting the trial. But we was very happy to see that the new varieties that we have released in 2015 take advantage of uh, the shrub systems. So, however, some varieties that are well appreciated, such as Yasin, they did not uh, take advantage to this management system when you compare them to Leona, Murid, and Che. So these are preliminary results that we have obtained, and this trial will be conducted next year, and we hope we will not encounter the same issues that we had this year, especially the COVID situation, and we will be able to take all the data, and especially the grain yield. So thank you very much.